Hello and welcome to the Red Robin pre-season mini-pod, which is powered by 360 Chartered Accountants and Budget Tyres Auto Centre. For this episode, I am delighted to be joined by Hull 𝗕𝗂𝗁𝗁𝗂𝗏𝗂𝗏 Mike Carter as we round up all the latest goings on at Hull Kingston Rovers, which include the recent Rovers Supporters Group Fans Forum and the release of our third, and I think final one, unless Mike corrects me, share of the season. Mike, I've been trying to get you on the podcast for a while, haven't I? But you've been so busy.
Such a busy guy, mate. Social butterfly, that's what people call me, the social butterfly. But no, I'm really glad that we've been able to get this one booked in, Chris, and we'll have a really good chat this pre-season.
Very briefly, before we go on to Rovers, of course, we've just had the climax of the Rugby League World Cup, the men's, women's, PDRL wheelchair, of course, Connor Lyons, World Cup winner. Hull Kingston Rovers' first World Cup winner in 50 years. Fantastic achievement for him. Very briefly, Mike, what did you make of the World Cup? Was it a thumbs up or a thumbs down from you?
I want to say thumbs in the middle. I think that's, not to sit on the fence too much, but there was loads of positives to take the international game. But there's areas where we look at things where we could have improved on. Obviously, disappointing from an England perspective to be knocked out in the semi-finals. Felt like the route was there to get us to the final, and it did feel a little bit disappointing for us not to make it. But the two semi-finals and obviously the final was really good spectacles in the men's game as well as the women's, the wheelchair and the PDRL, as you've said.
Yeah, for me, I think once people started concentrating on the product on the pitch and less about attendances and where games were being held and stuff like that, I think that's where the real joy was from. I was fortunate enough to go to the World Cup final, and as a spectacle, as an event, I think they did get it. The organisers got it absolutely spot on. Of course, it'd have been great to see England there. That is what we was all hoping for. But for me, it's just whetted the appetite for more international rugby league. I don't want us to have to wait now until a year, 2 years' time when they get their act together. I want to see more rugby league. And of course, England have announced that they'll be taking on France in a mid-season test. The women also will be playing France. And I think the general feeling, Mike, is that we want to see more rugby league on the international stage.
Yeah, definitely. I think it needs to be given more purpose, and I think there needs to be more stakes in the international game as well, especially in the short term. Because, like we say, we've got the World Cup every 4 years, but give us some Tri Nations, give us some Four Nations, give us the opportunity to see some close season international rugby league with obviously the mid-season international thrown in there as well.
Yeah, and we saw prior to the World Cup, 𝗔𝗰𝗰𝗏𝗏 and Mikey Lewis named in the England night squad. Interestingly, they're going to be playing in the European Championship, I think. I don't think it's been officially confirmed yet. That would be a night side there, but they've definitely said that England will be represented. So there's a chance for them boys, again, to stake a claim, not just in the night side, but hopefully in the full international side for the very near future.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And I think if it was up to me, and obviously it isn't, but I'd like to see there be an England team and an England Knights team in there so that you have two representations within that tournament, because it would be great to have the Knights play in the England side, because that would then obviously give the lads who are playing for the Knights a really good incentive to put on a performance against the senior lads.
100%. Well, that is all on the horizon, but the here and now is the recent Hull Kingston Rovers official supporters group Fans Forum. We was both in attendance, as were a number of people. It was a really well-attended event. I think anecdotally, 80 or 90 sign-ups on the night for the Rovers supporters group, which is fantastic numbers. But on the back of the Rugby League World Cup, and we was looking to the start of the new season, it was good to be back at Craven Park, wasn't it?
It was a really good sort of bridging event, wasn't it, that kind of like closed out last season, and then obviously now welcoming this season. As you've said, the turnout was brilliant. We had, I think it was 180 plus people in attendance on the night, and as you've mentioned there, so many new people signing up is obviously some really good revenue for the RSG, which will then go back into the academy and into the club in various different ways. And there can't be many fan bases out there who would have that many people rock up on a very cold Tuesday, November evening when there is the Football World Cup being played at the same time. It was a really good turnout.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the supporters who backed the event. The club did really well as well. I know it was a bit last minute in terms of who might be in attendance, but it was great to see Craig Franklin, We saw, of course, players 𝗕𝗵𝗿𝗁𝗁, Sean Kenny Dowell, Lakin was there, Willie Peters, Jason Neverton, a really fantastic lineup, and it really gave you a feel of the club. The only slight, and it's only very slight negativity, is that I'd like to maybe see a women's representation there on the night, because we are, pushing this whole club, and I'm really well behind it. So it'd been great to see women's representation there, but I think it was a stellar lineup from the Robins.
Yeah, it was, and I think the club need to be behind the RSG because of how important the RSG is to the club. We know why the RSG was set up 25 plus years ago. So for the fact that it's still in existence now shows that there is obviously a need for that to exist. So yeah, it was great for the club to be able to get behind it. Obviously, the club's the fans' first opportunity to have Willie Peters in front of them and to ask him questions and sort of see how he withheld himself in front of that large group, which was very good. I thought he spoke really well, and he gave some really good, strong answers, especially to Keith Pollard.
Well, Keith, if you're listening, I enjoyed your 2 questions. I enjoyed it even more, the fact that you'd typed them out, and I think you'd even laminated your questions. So it was a tremendous effort, Keith. So well done for doing that. But it was a nice night, wasn't it? In terms of there wasn't too much difficulty, unless you take out Hull TV, which has been the air of many Rovers fans, and that was brought up on the evening. I think when we talk about the RSG, we talk about the importance of it, and obviously it's sort of been repurposed over a number of years, hasn't it, in terms of the role it plays. But the role it plays is so important, and it's demonstrated by the appointment of Paula Cullen as the Academy Welfare Officer. Jason Neverton talked so highly of her and how important she is at the club and the role she plays with the young players. And we're one of the leading clubs I think one of the only clubs to have this role in our academy.
Yeah, and I think I've never met Paula, but I've heard such great things about her. And obviously, when I saw at the end of last season that her son Nathan was leaving the club, I was a little bit worried about what Paula's stance would be, whether she would still be at the club or whether she would look to, another opportunity. So I'm absolutely thrilled to know that she is staying. Obviously, Jason spoke so fondly of her and the work that she does, and it's a credit to the club that we've been able to retain her, but also her work is a credit as well.
Yeah, and I've seen on social media and stuff, snippets that the club are putting out, and especially Jason Neverton and Ben Lazenby and Kev Deaton, they put little snippets out of what the academy are doing, and it looks very much like we take care of our young players. We don't think about them just as rugby league players. Yes, as of course, we want them to be first team regulars. The reality is it's only going to be a small percentage of these academy players who'll make the grade at first team level, but it looks like we're preparing them for life in general and life away from rugby league if it doesn't quite pan out for them.
Yeah, that is important. I think it sends a really good, strong message. And as we know, there probably will only be a small percentage of those that actually do transfer into sort of professional rugby. But at the end of the day, if we're giving all of these young people the correct tools to be able to achieve what they can do, a lot of it then comes down to their attitude and their application. And that was something that Jason spoke pretty strongly about having being good people and having that right attitude. Because if you've got that, the club can obviously tinker and work with anything above and beyond. Obviously, you need some level of talent in there, but anything else should be able to be educated into them.
Yeah, and when one of the things Paul Lakin talked about, didn't he, was the investment in the club. Obviously, the ongoing investment from owner Neil Hudgell. And the academy is one area where you can really see the investment paying dividends, especially at a time when, it looked like the academy would be taken away from us. The elite status would be taken away from us. And since that point, we seem to have made great strides going forward.
Yeah, I think let's think back to the first team, relegation in 2016. When we got relegated, I think it felt like one of the worst things that could possibly happen. But when you look back on it now, it might have been one of the best things because of the way that we could realign, we could refocus, and we could sort of re-energize our motivation behind the club. You could almost say the same about this academy license. The fact that we was declined an academy license got everybody's backs up, and we was all like, what is this all about? Why has this happened? It then allowed the club to be able to realign their focus to understand where they'd gone wrong, and obviously very quickly put that to bed, and then secured a full-time license.
Yeah, really exciting stuff, and I'm sure many Robin supporters will be looking forward to seeing the academy players next season, and hopefully there'll be a few more double headers at Craven Park, because I know many supporters enjoyed getting the opportunity to see these players out on the pitch. If we look at some of the other things that was talked about on the night at the fans forum, we of course had Craig Shepherd, who's the Hull Foundation CEO. One of the questions posed to him was about wheelchair rugby. Of course, the Rugby League World Cup highlighted just what a fantastic and inclusive game it is, with many people clamouring to see more wheelchair rugby league. The question was asked, are Rovers going to put the hat in the ring and form a team? Of course, we've seen the recent addition of the PDRL team. We're making great strides in the women's game. We've just talked about the academy. We've even branched out into netball, and it looks like they're making great moves to introduce a wheelchair side. I suppose the side of it that not many people will be aware of is just a financial outlay it costs to introduce a side like that.
Yeah, along with a lot of things, especially in rugby league, these things cost money. I think the figure that Craig put on it was just over 20 grand, 21, 22 grand, something like that, I think is what he said. That is a lot of money, as Craig said, to a charity. Obviously, I do some volunteering work for the foundation, and I work with a lot of the lads and the lasses that do a lot of really good hard work down at the foundation. And I'm sure that if they can make it happen, they will find a way of finding that funding and finding ways to be able to fundraise and obviously get that set up. And again, this just shows how important the international game is, because I, for one, hadn't seen a game of wheelchair rugby before. But when I heard about what was happening and then it got through to the final, I made sure that I watched that entire game, because I could feel the buzz and the energy that was coming off the atmosphere that had been created from that tournament.
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully, it is on the horizon, and it's something that we'll see very soon at Hull Kingston Rovers. But again, like we said, it's finance, and it's you got to have either people prepared to put their hand in the pocket to back it, and hopefully it is going to come. I suppose, Mike, it highlights the change with the women's side, because obviously the women's and girls game was with the foundation, wasn't it? It shifted to the club side, which probably allowed greater investment into it. But it shows how things can grow and how much the club is really backing other areas of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And you have to look at the girls last year. That the first year that the girls team was in existence, the shirts and the kits that they played in was almost cast-offs from the men's team that they didn't want to wear. And that was in 2019. Now in 2022, they'd got promotion up into the championship, and they had bespoke kits, which was made in the same design as the home shirt for last year. But they had their own sponsor across the front there, which was the Blood Clinic. And that to me says that they're already making great strides, because they're able to secure their own sponsorship to wear on shirts when games aren't necessarily televised yet.
Yeah, and I think the club will admit they're not where they want to be yet, but they're doing everything they can possible to get there. And it's going to be a really interesting journey over these next 2, 3, 4 years to see where the women's game grows, not just at Hull Kingston Rovers, but in general. And hopefully Rovers will be at the forefront of any developments in years to come. One of the big talking points, not just at the fans forum, but with supporters in general, Mike, was the move from Sunday games to Friday. For me, it wasn't that big an issue, just because of the fact that we don't play that many Sunday games anyway. Has caused a bit of consternation amongst the supporter group. But it was interesting, wasn't it, when Paul Aiken said, actually, I think season ticket sales had increased on the back of the announcement. Are you happy? I know people might not. People might have seen you out on the pitch. I know you do a bit of work behind the scenes and stuff. Are you happy with the move to Friday night games predominantly?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate, Chris, in the fact that whether it was a Friday night or whether a Sunday afternoon, I would have been there, and I would make the time to be able to go. But I understand that a lot of people have commitments that are outside of their control, which does make a Friday night difficult, and some people that would make a Sunday afternoon difficult. And it's like most things in life, you can't please everybody. And it's really difficult for the club to have made that decision based on the fact that you're going to annoy somebody somewhere along the line. I think how I would look at it is the fact that if we know we're going to be playing on a Friday night, you've kind of got a good idea of when the fixtures are going to be ahead of time. How many times have we seen, 2 or 3 weeks before a fixture, oh, we're going to move this now from a Sunday to a Friday or a Sunday to a Saturday? And that's not to say that that's not going to happen, but it feels a lot less likely if our home games are penciled in for a Friday night. The chances are, if it's going to be on telly, it's probably going to be the Friday. Of course, it could be moved for a Thursday, and obviously we've now got the Channel 4 contract on a Saturday. But I do think it'll give people a little bit more time to be able to plan efficiently, opposed to it changing as awkwardly at last minute.
Yeah, and it's not just about supporters, is it? Because it's about the players as well. And one of the reasons for the move to Friday night is to guarantee better recovery time for the players. And of course, we saw last season how injuries bit in the end. And I suppose from a club and a player welfare point of view, they've got to do as much as possible to ensure that they get the top players out on the pitch week in, week out. And if this is one of the moves that helps that, I suppose we've got to support it.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the player welfare is massive across all sport, and so it should be, and especially in a heavy contact sport like rugby league. But let's think a little bit about routines as well. As human beings, we've all got a routine. We're all creatures of habit. If your kickoff times are constantly changing because you're a night game, then you're an afternoon game on a Sunday, then you're an early on a Saturday, it can be quite difficult. For anybody that's a football fan and knows Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp, he'll always complain when they've had a European game midweek and then they've got the early kickoff on a Saturday. If we're playing at the same time every Friday or Thursday evening, we're going to know what sort of routine we're at. We know what time the lads will eat. They know what time the lads are going to arrive at the stadium. All of that will stay pretty much the same, which should hopefully give us a little bit of consistency in terms of game preparation as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Friday night games. Not as much Thursday night games, but definitely Friday night. For me personally, it's not a massive change. I suppose for me, the only disappointment is that I've got two boys. I've got one who's 6 years old, and I'm dipping him in and out of games at Hull Kingston Rovers. I know he's not going to go week in, week out, and I suppose the removal of these Sunday games just makes it that little bit more difficult. And I'm probably not the only one who's got young children who want to take to the game and get that red and white into them. The removal of the Sunday games just makes it that little bit harder, but I also appreciate there'll be a lot of thought gone into it by the club. These decisions, Mike, aren't done on a whim, are they?
No, there's a lot of planning and a lot of preparation that goes into these things. As Paul Lakin said, they got the fixture list through 2 weeks prior to the release. So they had a really good idea of what other clubs had picked Friday nights and which other clubs had picked Sundays. And he said that even teams like Wakefield now have started to look away from the traditional Sunday into the Friday. And it does very much feel like rugby league is now a night game opposed to a weekend game.
Yeah, didn't he say even if they'd have chosen Sunday games, the first 14 games of the season would have been on a Friday or a Thursday or something, just because of the way that other teams have picked their games and the way the fixture list had panned out?
Yeah, if you look at the fixtures, we don't actually have a Sunday away game either. And I think in the first half of the season, we've already got 8 games that are going to be broadcast on television. So if we've got young supporters who are unable to necessarily attend a fixture, hopefully that they'll be able to watch it on the television, or even if that is still too late. Obviously, with modern day tech now, we've got the one touch record, so they can watch it on the Saturday morning if that is a little bit more sort of convenient. But again, that's really good exposure to have 8 games already scheduled to broadcast on TV in 2023. We've not even kicked a ball yet.
Yeah, great exposure for the club. Very briefly before we move on to the playing side, talking about the redevelopments at Craven Park. The West End, the club are, I think, desperate to knock it down. They want to increase the commercial revenue and they want to obviously generate more income. But Paul Lakin, I think, was it 14 million to knock it down and then rebuild, estimated costs. And unfortunately, that money's just not there at the moment, isn't it?
No, I mean, who really in rugby league has got that kind of money? And they're obviously doing their due diligence and finding out this information ahead of time, because there's going to be things that are going to come up that are going to become a cropper. Because how many times do you look at a quote and then it never actually turns out to be that? It always ends up being X amount more. And we do need to look at having that extra investment and extra revenue, but we might find that there's a more efficient way of actually delivering that rather than sort of like pulling the full thing down and then rebuilding it again.
Yeah. more interesting stuff on the horizon. If we look to the playing side, obviously it was announced on the night that 𝗕𝘂𝗵𝗿𝗀𝗃 would be continuing as captain. The interesting part about that was there was no real announcement about the vice captaincy role, with Willie Peters saying that it'd be a management group, a group of players who would be supporting 𝗕𝘂𝗵𝗿𝗃. And I suppose when you look at some of the players within the squad, George King obviously recently captained Ireland at the Rugby League World Cup. We do seem to have a crop of experienced pros, which probably makes sense to have that group behind SKD.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting decision. To start with, 𝗕𝘂𝗵𝗿𝗃 being the club captain is absolutely the correct thing to do. Obviously, he's held that role now for a few years, and he's delivered very strongly on his commitment to the club. I'm a fond believer in that your captain should normally be your player's player of the year. And if you look back to the 2022 awards night, 𝗕𝘂𝗵𝗿𝗃 was named by his peers as player's player of the year. Perfect opportunity to give him the captaincy once again. And hopefully it'll allow some of the other lads in the group as well to be able to develop their leadership skills. Because as we know, Skids isn't going to be around forever. We need to be looking at a transition to find out who's going to be that next sort of permanent captain. And 𝗕𝗂𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃 working within a group of leaders. We've got Ryan Hall, we've got George King, we've got Lachlan Coote, we've got Kane Lynette. We've got people in there who are very, very well known across the game, who have got bags of experience, and hopefully we'll be able to rub that off onto some of the younger lads.
Yeah, and you said SKD's not going to be around it forever, but he was non-committal on his future, wasn't he, when he was asked whether this would be his final season? He said he'd cross that bridge when it comes to it. So we'll see, won't we? I suppose if he has an injury-free season and he's able to play the majority of games, he may be questioning that himself, whether he could go around again. So again, that's on the horizon, very much something to look forward to. The other revelation from Willie Peters was about 𝗕𝗂𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃 and the way that we've become accustomed to seeing them play at Rovers might be slightly different next season.
Yeah, that was a really interesting point that he made there. Obviously, we've come accustomed now to seeing two hookers playing on the pitch at the same time, but Willie had stated that wouldn't be the case. And part of me is quite pleased about that in a way. I feel like it means that we've got our forward options covered a little bit better. Obviously, we've got different players now that can play that loose forward position. Because you're going to get to the point where you might burn out Matt and Jez. If you look at their attitude towards the game and their application, they are two players that are kind of first gear, fifth gear. There's not really a great deal in the middle because of the way that the pace that they play the game at. So it'll be important to be able to spell those guys and hopefully give them the breaks and the rests that we need. When we got as many injuries as we did last year, I don't quite know how those two managed to play as many games as they did based on the amount of minutes that they was playing. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. And these are, I suppose, a few nuances that we're going to see from Willie Peters. It's not going to be a carbon copy of last season. He's coming to stamp his own mark on the team. So it's going to be interesting to see how these play out. He confirmed that Lachlan Coote is definitely first choice fullback. He's had a bit of a break away from the game. Obviously went back to Australia, a bit of recuperation, and Willie Peters is very much looking forward to seeing Lachlan Coote play for Hull Kingston Rovers.
I think we all are, aren't we? The club played, I think it was 30 games last season across, both competitions. Lachlan only played in 17 of those, so that does feel disappointing, especially when the feeling that we all had when he signed, the belief that we had in him, he will have been very disappointed that he only managed to play 17 games. So I'm sure he'll be looking to improve on that number next year. Obviously, as well, the topic that was brought up, Chris, was goal kicking, and it'll be interesting to see who gets that mantle when the season does start. We obviously, Willie Peters mentioned that they were going to be doing some goal kicking on the Tenerife summer camp, the winter camp, in the summer weather, while they're away. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that as well.
Yeah, I think 𝗕𝗂𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃 put his hand up, hasn't he, and not ruled himself out the reckoning. Yeah, well, I think that is the point, though, isn't it? That when you focus too much on one person taking kicking duties, that if that person ever becomes injured, it's very difficult for the next person. Of course, we haven't even mentioned Jordan Abdul in in there who's fit and raring to go this season. I do think if 𝗕𝗂𝗄𝗏, and it's a lot to put on one player, but if he plays a majority of games and he has a superb season, Rovers will have had a good season. I do think, and that's what we're all desperate to see. Another interesting point, and I think it got a few head turns and a few gasps, was that Rovers will be operating at close to salary cap next season. What was it? An increase of 300k in the playing budget in terms of salaries, etc. Does that put a bit of pressure on Willie Peters, I suppose? Because for a long time, Rovers have admitted and openly stated that they've been well below salary cap. The fact that now they're at that upper echelon of money, I suppose people will be questioning, if we don't get off to a good start or we don't have a good season, well, where's that money being spent?
I completely it does, and I don't think that's the only thing that puts pressure on him either. The upturn in form that we had under Danny Maguire, the upturn in form that we had under Tony Smith for that good 18 months to 2 year period, all puts pressure on Willie Peters, because the club's on a roll now. We kind of feel like we've got a really good buzz about the place. We've got off the field stuff. He's in a really good place, and Willie's coming into his first head coach's role under a lot of pressure. It's going to be really important that we start the season strongly, especially now when we look at the squad depth and think, yeah, we've got cover. We really have.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily just, Jesse Sue, 𝗕𝗵𝗿𝗁𝗁𝗍, Reece Kennedy coming in who suddenly raised the salary cap through the roof. You've got the lads who came from Bradford, 𝗕𝗵𝗿𝗁𝗁𝗍, Rowan Milnes, Ethan Ryan, Matty Staunton. Of course, their salaries have probably risen as they've got a foothold in the first team, and as we've extended their contracts. We'll have players like Mikey Lewis, 𝗔𝗰𝗏𝗏 offered new deals, so it's not necessarily the wage bill shooting up because of new players coming in. It's probably rewards to players who we want to keep hold of for a long time, and players being rewarded for what they've been doing in a Rovers shirt for a few years now.
That's it. In a salary cap sport, what you kind of have to do is, when you have a player who you want to keep, on his next contract, you've got to offer him that little bit more money. And then the next one, you're probably looking at a little bit more again. And this is where players end up leaving clubs when the club doesn't necessarily want to lose them, because they need to find better ways of spending the money. St Helens probably didn't want to lose 𝗕𝗂𝗄𝗏, but they was aware that they could probably just promote Jack Welsby's wage up a little bit, which then freed 𝗕𝗂𝗄𝗏's wages off the salary cap. And that's how these clubs at the top of the league operate. They have to offload good players and replace them with equally good players on less money. And then you've kind of got to build it up from there. The Bradford lads, really, really good acquisitions for the club, but the money that they'll have come in on versus what they're on now, it'll probably be 3 or 4 times that. And you've got to find that elsewhere on your cap. And obviously, we've been fortunate in the fact that we weren't spending up to cap. But now that we are, it'll make the retentions heading into 2023, into 24 really interesting, because you might find that we can't keep everybody that we've got now because the cap won't fit.
No, and that's it. If you want to sometimes bring players in, you've got to move some on, haven't you? And one player who was spoke about on the night, Keith Pollard asked a question: Would Willie Peters wish he'd have kept Corbin Sims? And it was a very firm no, wasn't it? He's pretty much, he played well at the back end of the season, but he didn't do enough over the time that he was at the club. And I suppose we've moved on from there now, haven't we? But like we say, if you've got to bring players in, you've got to move some on, and there might be some difficult decisions in next season or the season after that about who we actually do retain if we're going to look to grow as a team. We talked about Willie Peters probably or maybe being under a little bit of pressure, especially with us operating close to salary cap, but you wouldn't think he was under pressure because he comes across very well, doesn't he? Very cool, very calm, very affable. He seems like a great guy who's really buying into what he wants to do at Hull Kingston Rovers. And, as a supporter, I could just sit there listening to him all night because he knows his stuff.
Yeah, I had the same feeling when Rovers signed with Tony Smith, and he came along to one of our heritage nights and he spoke really well. And I could listen to that guy talk all day about rugby league, and I'm getting very similar vibes from Willie. The fact that he came over so early after the NRL season had finished, he had a brief holiday and he was in the country at the beginning of October, ready to start work. The lads weren't in pre-season training until the beginning of November, so he had a really good run, obviously, to get to grips with his the area, the people that are behind the scenes at the club, and then obviously introducing himself into the playing group. And there's probably members of the playing group that haven't even yet met Willie Peters. Obviously, we've got lads that have been away on international duty. I think some of the internationals are returning in the next coming days. I saw George King put some on Instagram today saying back to work tomorrow with an alarm set for 4:45 a.m. So, you know, he's going to be getting used to some of these lads coming through now. So, yeah, he's definitely going to be one to watch for us, I think.
And our overseas imports are here, and they've had a bit of a baptism of fire in terms of the weather, haven't they? Because it hasn't been the warmest welcome.
No, it got very cold, didn't it, midweek? That really did kind of like tip the scales on the old temperature, but hopefully they can acclimatise pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else to take away from the night, Mike?
Give me more of it. I'd love to see more sort of fans forums, fan interactive nights. You could even sort of condense it down, like in the sense of that the guests was amazing, but there was probably too much quality there that you had to kind of sort of dilute it down a little bit. You know, maybe break it up. I'd be well up for one of them every 2 or 3 months, really. Really giving the fans the opportunity to buy into the club and to just sort of learn a little bit more and put a few quid behind the bar.
Yeah, definitely. And full credit to the RSG committee members, 𝗔𝗂𝗱𝗏𝗏, you know, Andrea Bruce, people like that who've done a sterling job to get this over the line. These are volunteers. They're giving up their own time to raise money for the club and put on events like this. So huge thanks to them, put on a really good event. And like you said, Mike, plenty more to come. And I think they're having Christmas drinks. Is it the 4th of December at 𝗕𝗂𝗍𝗏𝗏 Tavern? So I know they'd appreciate people going down and having a catch up and talking about Hull Kingston Rovers, and I'm sure you'll be able to sign up as a member on the day. So please get across there. My Hull KR share, it's going from strength to strength. I love watching and reading your stuff you put out there. Every other day it seems like there's a new shirt you've got or a new shirt you're talking about, and of course none so more than the completed Holy Trinity of shirts that Rovers have just completed with the announcement of the Diamonds Are Forever shirt. How impressed have you been with the shirt collection for this season?
I've been very impressed. I think they've done a really good job at trying to cover one of the widest demographics that you'll find in any kind of retail environment. It's a very difficult task to be able to please everybody, but if everybody likes one, I think they've succeeded, and it feels like most people like more than one, which is a great result.
Well, it was interesting to say that, Mike, because Craig Franklin, who of course was at the fans forum, alluded to the fact that the shirts sort of each hit a different demographic. They're sort of targeted at different fan sections. I think was it the home shirt is at maybe a younger audience. Obviously, the Queensland are maybe a more mature audience, and forgive me, I can't remember what he said about the Diamonds one. Is that just for everybody?
Diamonds are for everybody.
Yeah.
The Diamonds one is kind of a retro take, but in a futuristic way. So you're kind of covering a little bit of the retro into the 90s with the diamonds, but the design itself is quite futuristic in terms of its approach.
Yeah, and traditionally, you'd have a home and away shirt, and then Rovers would bring out an alternate shirt, which they'd maybe wear on one game, or it'd be done as a fundraiser for charity, etc. But they're not going with that approach next season, are they?
No, they're going with home, and then they've got alternate 1 and alternate 2, or which might be called alternate Queensland, alternate Diamonds. The idea behind that, I think, is so that you get to use your shirts across more games. The one-off shirts have always been really good with Rovers, but if you only wear it once, you only get one little mini boom before you wear it in terms of kit sales. Whereas if you're going to wear this one, what we're going to have 14 away games, 13 away, and then Magic Weekend. So you've got 14 games there. If they wear each one 7 times, they'll probably see little mini spikes and be able to promote each shirt dependent on when we're wearing it. So as much as it's probably a good thing to do in terms of getting the fans to get the money's worth out of the kits that they can wear to a game when the players are wearing it, it's probably a lot to do with retail and marketing, which is obviously very clever.
Yeah, and is it just the Queensland shirt and Diamond shirt which are rotating? There'll be no opportunity maybe to see the Queensland at a home game?
It's possible. It is possible.
Because it is very close. It's not a million miles away from the home shirt, is it? In terms of, I know it's maroon, but it's not a million miles away.
No, there's definitely the possibility for that. Obviously, when you're at home, you kind of control what you wear as long as you put the application into the RFL and they approve it, which it shouldn't really be a problem. So if they wanted to do that, then they most certainly could. We've seen us wear alternate shirts at home. We've wore away shirts at home as recently as 2015. So it's definitely an option. Normally with things like that, it's when you want to promote an event or when you want to increase sales of something. If something's not selling, you wear it at home to get that little buzz. So I suppose if we're wearing it at home, we might find that it's not sold too well, but it's looking like it's doing really well. They've already sold out of one batch and they've received a second batch now.
Yeah, and I know the club are definitely planning something around the Queensland victory and possibly reunions and stuff like that. So who knows what might come at the back end of the season in terms of that. But I suppose shirt-wise, Mike, is this your favourite ever trio? Is the one that tops it?
No, this is absolutely my favourite trio, and it's incredible how they just seem to keep bringing out good shirt after good shirt after good shirt. I'm an independent website, an independent fan, exactly like you are, Chris. So I'm quite willing to criticise something if I don't see that it's the right thing for the club or the fan base. But I've not actually found myself in that position for a good few years now because of the quality of the kits that keep getting put out, which for me is absolutely brilliant because I feel like it's much easier to be positive about something than it is negative.
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, do you know what I'd love to see? A round collar.
Yeah.
I'd love the shirts. I think are great, and you know, Christmas presents and stuff. You know, my boys will be doing all right out the club when Santa comes this year. But I'd love to see a round collar, and whether I don't know whether the fan issue shirts could be round collared instead of the well, I don't know what you'd call it. You'll know what to call it, but instead of like, you know, I just as a supporter when we're talking about fashion garments and that is what they are in essence, aren't they? We don't wear them as players; we're wearing them as a fashion item, and I just think a round collar would be the one change for me.
Yeah, the V-neck. There's a V-neck collar on the home shirt and the Queensland shirt. Now, if you're going to wear a shirt over a hoodie, a V-neck collar is quite good for that because you've got space for your hood to come out the top of it. The diamond shirt's got like it has got more of a crew, but it's kind of got like a cut-out crew at the front. A crew would work fine. It's just a bit more restrictive in terms of what you can put either underneath it or obviously around it. But just to build up on what you've said there, I would love to see a turnover collar, like an old-fashioned turnover collar on a playing shirt. And clubs have touched into it recently. Huddersfield have got one on the replica home shirt for next year. We've seen Salford do it. It's creeping back in, and I just keep my fingers crossed that if I wish it into existence enough, sooner or later we might get a turnover collar on there, and you know all the cool lads can wear the collar up, and it'll look brilliant.
Mike, that's what I thought there was teasing us with the diamond shirt, because obviously going back, was it 94-95 season, or I think with the shirt. I thought that's what they might be bringing back, but I suppose from a manufacturing point of view, maybe more cost implications. Is it maybe a more difficult make? And you know, I don't know enough about
it could be.
Yeah,
absolutely could be. Yeah, and the other thing is that they're possibly scared of doing it as well because they don't know how the wider fan base would react to it.
Yeah,
because it is a throwback, but it's quite a radical change to make to a shirt that isn't necessarily. It's not a necessity. It's kind of just like oh yeah, let's see what happens. But because of the position that the club are in and retail sales being so important, it is quite a big risk to take. So I can fully understand why there's a little bit of hesitation in terms of pulling the trigger on it.
Yeah, and Craig Franklin did mention, didn't he, about many fans harp on about bringing the white shirt with red band and why the club don't do it. But I think Craig said it. Ultimately, he just doesn't sell as many shirts as the other ones to bring out.
Yeah, I've had this conversation a lot with Craig because I'm a lover of the white shirt with a red band. I've really grown to love us playing in red the last couple of years. I think it is a really good, strong look at home. But I do understand there is a lot of nostalgia involvement there for the whole white shirt, red band, and they're not going to be able to avoid it forever. They're going to have to produce a white shirt with a red band at some point in the future. And what I would say to the people that are wanting a white shirt with a red band is you better make sure that shirt sells out when they do it. Because if they do it and it doesn't sell out, we'll lose it forever. Because if we're going to harp on about wanting it and wanting it and wanting it, people are going to have to put their hands in the pocket and buy it. Because that's the biggest issue with a white shirt with a red band. a lot of people just think, oh, I've got one of them. I've got that one from 2016. That looks the same as that. I've got that one from 2017. It looks like that. So they don't buy it. And that's why we kind of lose the opportunity to have that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Really good chat, Mike. Before we wrap up, tell us about Hull KR shirts and what's on the horizon, what you've got out at the moment, what people can catch up with.
Yeah, so it's going really well at the moment. Put a new episode out last weekend, which is the 2022 away shirt, 𝗕𝗂𝗵𝗿𝗁𝗂𝗏. So a really good, strong name there. That was donated into the collection by 𝗕𝗂𝗵𝗿𝗁𝗂𝗏. Those guys have started sponsoring episodes of Talking Shirts. So you'll see some of their branding appearing across my videos, very similar to your sponsors with 𝓕𝓸𝓫𝓷𝓼 Chartered Accountants and Budget Tires Auto Centre. So it's great to see that we've got local companies coming around. There they are, local companies supporting independent podcasts and website and social media. So that's great to see. I'll have a new episode of Talking Shirts out in a couple of weeks. I've actually covered the Queensland shirt. I don't normally cover replicas. I normally wait for a match worn one, but I was that excited about that with stories to tell. So I've covered an episode of that. I've got a new feature coming to hullkrshirts.co.uk over the weekend. I've been putting some squad number games out. You might have seen those across social media where you try and guess the squad number from the player from the squad number, sorry. I've got a list of every single squad number that we've had from 2007 through to modern day. So I'm going to publish that hopefully over the weekend, ready for the squad numbers, which are imminent, according to Willie Peters at the RSG event. So that's really exciting. And I've also got a Christmas Advent video planned for every day in the build up to Christmas, where we'll have a shirt number that corresponds with the day of the month. So keep an eye out for those as well.
Yeah, no wonder I can't get you on the podcast, mate. You're that busy, planning ahead, getting content out and stuff like that. But just on that Queensland shirt, I know you're not doing a player issue one, but a nice touch from the club and one that's probably gone a little bit under the radar is the fact you can get the numbers and names on the back of your shirt from obviously the side that played against Queensland. So it's a nice little touch from the club.
Yeah, well, you've teed me up a little bit there, Chris, because I don't know if you know this or if you don't know this, but that was actually my idea.
There you go. Are you on a retainer? Are you getting a percentage of that 15 quid?
No, I should do though, shouldn't I? Should do really when you think about it. No, there was they did a sponsors afternoon where they invited some of the former players down that actually played in that game. Dave Hall was there, George Fairbairn, Mike Smith, to name a few. And when they was talking about the shirt and that, I said, look, you can't sell these with squad numbers on for next season because we don't know who's going to be what number. So I said, have you considered doing legend or heritage printing? And I said, I'm putting your favourite, legend or hero from that era on the back of the shirt. So have you got any of them gold numbers left from the Boilermakers? And everyone just kind of sat there as the room went silent. I was like, well, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. And then Paul Lakin sort of passed comment to me and said, that he thought it was a fantastic idea, as did Craig Franklin. And then by the end of the week, they were selling them. When I got mine printed with Smith 3 on the back, I went in the club shop and they said they'd done loads of them. So I'm quite proud to be able to say that was a Hull KR shirts idea that the club have benefited financially from. And obviously supporters have benefited in a way to amend the shirt in a really cool way.
Yeah. And I suppose for someone who loves shirts, it's them little quirks, them little, things that make it individual that really appeal to you.
Oh, absolutely, Chris. And you're very similar in that the fact that you volunteer your own time to do an independent podcast and an independent social media. You don't make any money off this. I don't make any money off what I do. It's much, much more important of the work that goes into what I do to be able to sort of showcase the club and the heritage and the history of what we do. That's far more important than any monetary value. Very similar with a calendar that we did in 2022. I made no money off that at all. I didn't want anything. I don't want anything. I just want to be a part of projects and I want to be a part of a club that is as amazing as Hull Kingston Rovers.
Yeah, and you can't say it fairer than that. That brings us to the end of another jam-packed Red Robin pre-season mini-pod. Of course, Mike, a huge thanks to you for giving me your views and opinions. Remember, you can check out all things Hull KR shirts at hullkrshirts.co.uk and, of course, across Mike's social media channels. We are, of course, powered by 𝓕𝓸𝓫𝓷𝓼 Chartered Accountants and Budget Tires Auto Centre. So please make sure you pay them a visit. And lastly, a huge thank you to you for either tuning in and watching on YouTube or listening on podcast. And remember, let's all live, love, laugh and be happy.